My name's Eliza Cooper. I'm from Drummoyne, from Sydney, and my project's called Bat Lake, and we're making a dance film that's looking at bats and all things related to bats. My artistic practice is very grounded in improvisation. Through our residencies, we're always developing strong improvisation performances, and we don't necessarily work with choreography strictly. I'm interested in animals and human behaviour. My DAIR venue was McDonald College, which I actually attended when I was a child and did a lot of my ballet training there, so that was very special. So that was our venue. We had 2 weeks there, and in that time we really wanted to maintain some of the practices we'd already developed for Bat Lake, because they're sort of durational performances that need to be rehearsed and practiced, and I guess that's the way to make the improvisation choreography, is that it's very strict improvisation. So we wanted to maintain all of that stuff and then also find new things, which we did, which was fantastic. And we had quite a lot of breakthroughs in terms of the artistic vision for the piece. So we're making a film. So the pandemic impacted our project a lot because we were originally planning to do a live performance to make a maybe approximately 1 hour work of Bat Lake. And then in March, I spent a lot of time thinking about this idea because I didn't want to push the project back by years. I wanted to keep it within the next 12 months sort of thing. So decided to make it into a film, invested in some technologies, started making films. And so it's changed the whole essence of the work, but also improved it massively because we're shooting on some really exciting locations, and it's going to be sort of a mixed experience, sort of like a David Attenborough documentary in parts, other parts like a horror film where there's more villainous bats or demonic creatures. Other things are more biological. So we're sort of going into a lot of more different places and different locations, which we can obviously do with film. So one of our main aims for our DAIR residency was to develop some more solo material on the dancers that was more concrete than the improvisations, just so they have something that they can go to and reference. Yeah, so the DAIR program was fantastic because I got to work with my favourite people in the world, who are my close friends and collaborators. And my mentor, Kay Armstrong, has always been extremely supportive and always giving good suggestions, good ideas, useful criticisms, and to have a studio and to have the grant attached to it was just incredible. The key benefits of the DAIR program is access to studio space, which is just the best thing for dancers. Having a connection to a mentor is also something that can't be underestimated. It just enhances the professionalism of your program, of your project, as soon as you have someone experienced giving you feedback.
I'm Alice Weber. I'm based in Sydney in the inner west. My artistic practice is a choreographic and performance practice. I use a lot of influences from my history, including somatic practice, ballet, critical theory. I work solo and collaboratively. Yeah, so my project was a 2-week program of self-directed activities. I was originally meant to be up in Alstonville Studios, and it got relocated to home due to COVID. So that prompted me to kind of reconfigure where I was going with the 2 weeks. But on the other hand, I had a similar amount of open space and time to just dedicate to the work. So I worked on a series of short videos that enacted small beauty rituals on my garden at home. And that took the form of about 10 different videos between 1 and 3 minutes each, quite close up, all playing with this idea of performing ritual, performing femininity. Choreographically, it was a very light touch project. During the 2 weeks, I also hosted some talks with some previous collaborators internationally. So I had a chat with artist and activist based in Poznan in Poland, Monika Blaszczak, and also with 2 artists from Vancouver, Vanessa Goodman and Ileana Chilidin, and also Alexa Wilson in Auckland. And so I also developed this series of not quite interviews, but conversations around different issues that had come up for us from the perspective of practice, but also a bit more broadly through COVID. I really enjoyed the structure around practice, being able to kind of dedicate that time and focus to the work in a way that was also supported by a really supportive body of people, and that situated me in a community of people also thinking in these ways. At the same time, it was very light touch and I had a lot of freedom, and that was also important for the work to kind of generate its own directions. Yeah, it was just tangible support at a time where there was a lot of uncertainty, and I really appreciate that. Yeah.
So I'm Ella Watson-Heath.
And I'm Kieran Clancy Lowe.
And the project we've been working on is called Save the Endorphin. We had our residency at ACPE, and the practice that we kind of developed over our week residency was developing this kind of incursion that hopefully one day we can take into schools, and it's about the developing mindfulness and well-being practices for young people that they can then carry forward from those formative years to use when things get hard at school or in life. The opportunity to get into the studio and to have ambition for creating work in the future, but to not feel that extreme pressure of oh, this is your creative development number, whatever. You're just getting started, throwing ideas around.
Yeah, it gave us a fair bit of room for dexterity in what we wanted to make. It wasn't like putting pegs in holes. It was more free than that, which is a great opportunity for any artists. Come round, come close. I have a story to tell, and it's a good one. You won't want to miss any of this. It was time to go on the journey. Every endorphin had to go on the journey, but today was Andy's day. The river was running, wild, fast, and the little endorphin was scared. But Andy had been waiting their whole life for this moment. So they took a deep breath and plunged in, diving straight into the rapids. They were carried by the current towards their destination. Today, they were going to the center, the place where all things go. If they could make it there, it would all be worth it. But first, they'd have to overcome the challenges. First, there was the river, of course, winding its way towards the place where all the pressure builds up. A colossal whirlpool. Surviving that would be a massive achievement in itself. Then out of the whirlpool and into the waterfall. A mountain of water cascading down, 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 splash! Back into the river, but this time, building up speed, building up momentum, headed straight for the jump. A leap across a crack in the world so colossal that many saner minds wouldn't even attempt it. That said, endorphins aren't known for their sanity.
Well, what happened?
Well, no one knows for sure. You see, by the time Andy got to the jump, the river had started to slow. It had been doing that recently. It was getting worse and worse. So if Andy had made the jump, they would have had to stop and look back at all their friends, not even being able to attempt it. If Andy made it alone.
Wow, way to bring the mood down.
I didn't say you would like this story.
Guess you didn't. Why the sucky ending though? Couldn't they just build a rope ladder for their friends to cross?
It's not as simple as that. You see, Andy needs your help.
My name is Ryuichi Fujimura. I am based in Sydney. And my practice is I dance, mostly in contemporary, but also I practice body weather. And also I enjoy doing other form of dance. So I recently started Latin ballroom dance. And occasionally, like once, I'll occasionally do house class. And I see myself as a performer primarily. So I enjoy working with directors, choreographers, and other dancers. So my original residency date was in early May, and the COVID happened. So during that time, I had a meeting with my Zoom meeting with my collaborators and my mentor. And then I was going to do the studio residency in late July, and I had a schedule crash, and Allsdance and Ready Made generously, kindly, they agreed to reschedule my residency. So my residency is happening in a month's time. And the project is my own solo, so written, choreographed, and performed by me. And I've been working on this solo for a long time now, and I used my previous Allsdance residency in 2018 to develop this solo. So, and it's been shown to the public already, and I was debating whether I should leave this project and move on, but I had this nagging feeling that the work wasn't complete yet. So then there's this residency offer with stipend, so I thought that would enable me to work with Lola Turner, who is a videographer, and I always wanted to work with her. And also now this residency came with a mentor, so I chose Kate Champion as my mentor. As independent dancers or choreographers, we have very limited resource, so it's incredible to have access to a studio full-time for a week or two. And also this residency came with money, so that, because I've never had I've never had the financial resource to engage collaborator for my own work before, so that's amazing.
My name is Emma Harrison, and I am based in Newtown here in Sydney. And I had a dance DAIR residency at the ACP, the Australian College of Physical Education. The week that I had with DAIR was working on a new work called Let Them Eat It. And this was, kind of the first research development that I'd had in the studio. So trying to unpack Marie Antoinette and her scrutiny and her many kind of stereotypes and things that are attached to her and attached to women in general. As a independent dance artist, my kind of work that I'm making, the body of work, all sits around women and the iconography of specific women and how that relates to my personal history and my personal journey as a woman. So I've made a work about Madonna and about Marilyn Monroe, and then just fitting with the M theme, jumped into Marie Antoinette. I find her this fascinating character, known as like this publicly vapid and completely out of touch, wealth-hungry, ruthless, incestuous woman, but actually she was just really young and naive, and just kind of looking at the things that society have placed on her and how that's been historically talked about and written about, and kind of change what the perception of her is. My process is heavily based in improvisation. I work a lot with textural and sensation embodiment, looking at images and pulling them apart and doing a lot of like mind mapping of word association and putting that into my body and seeing what unfurls and what textures in my body or what rhythms, and I just wanted to spend the week. I was working with a collaborator, Luke Maness. He's a musician and composer, and we have worked together previously. And so this week was kind of both of us unpacking her journey, and I guess from the aims, I really just wanted to kind of get a really in-depth movement language and physical language in my body that I could then break open and put back together in a multitude of different ways. And then working with Luke, trying to, we were looking a lot at the music of Marie Antoinette's time, and so we made this warped harpsichord symphony number. I got to work with the incredible Kate Armstrong as my mentor, and she was just like a really great person to have as both an outside eye and also as this kind of mentor in terms of making work in the future and what that looks like in relationship to Ausdance and in relationship to moving this project forward, how to kind of solidify myself as a solo artist, solo dance independent artist in Sydney. So yeah, her support was fantastic, as well as ACP, the studios there. Diane and Nalina both were able to come in and see how I was going, and that actually led to me teaching a workshop for their first years, which was really fantastic. I could share some of the processes that I did in my DAIR residency there, and then I was able to teach that over Zoom, but with the new cohort of first years. Yeah, I learnt to articulate my ideas better with the help of Kay, and even just talking with my collaborator Luke and on the music, being able to kind of really hone in on what it is that I'm saying and talking about. The key benefits of DAIR would have to be the support, so both in terms of offering mentorship and this kind of producer body that helps to find you space and things. Like, I think that's so important. The funding is really important as well. It kind of validifies our art form as work and as a contribution to society, and I think that's really important that arts gets that kind of funding and backing. Yeah.
My name is Natasha Sturgis and I'm based in Sydney. Before COVID, I was based between London and Sydney, but for now, I'm in Sydney. Bit about my practice. So I am a contemporary dancer and choreographer. and I'm really interested in making feminist work. My project is a body of work called The Land of Her, and it has a bit of a backstory as to how I kind of arrived at it. I was going through a bit of a crisis of identity. For my whole life, I'd been really proud of certain attributes that I had. I was very polite, very nice, very helpful. And as I learned a little bit more about feminism, I realized that a lot of these are very female qualities. And so I began thinking how much of this part of my personality is unique to me, and how much do I owe it to society and the patriarchy and what's been these values that have been instilled into me subconsciously. My body of work, The Land of Her, very abstractly creates this world where if only women have ever existed, or if only women, that gender existed, would we still have these attributes? Would we still have these dynamics or divisions between these concept of masculine or feminine? I'm also really interested in this dichotomy of feminine versus unfeminine as polar opposites as well. So my body of work started as a solo, then it developed into a trio, which was performed in February. And this DAIR residency was to further develop this work into a larger, more full-length work. So I work very closely with a composer called Alicia Jane Turner, and she's based in London. And in general, I always work with all-female collaborators, creators, dancers, from sound and lighting, tech, through to rehearsal directors, or even just research partners. I find that really important to the authenticity of the work. So my dancers, I had 2 dancers for my last project in London. They were this lovely girl called Sune and another girl called Satoko. They were both based in London, but one was from Japan and one was from Norway. And then when I took on the DAIR residency, with it going online, I was able to include them in the residency, as well as a few other international collaborators. When I was undertaking this DAIR residency, it was during the peak time of COVID. So it was a very, very turbulent time, and things were changing very, very quickly. And I had a lot of support and a lot of encouragement from the DAIR team to really continue to create the work in the residency. And my residency was in collaboration or in partnership with Karen Kirkenhoven. So although I wasn't able to physically undertake this residency in its intended space, it was still very much supported and created alongside both the Ausdance team and Karen. So it meant that despite a lot of really, really hard times for all of my dancers who were involved in the project, it still gave me a lot of structure, but also a lot of flexibility to create, to continue to create my work. When I create work, I always like to involve my dancers in the creation process, and so generally that is using inspiration or stimulus and facilitating sustained improvisation, and from that we'll manipulate movement generated. I really tried to recreate that process in the online context and try and keep it as authentic to my practice as possible. Normally in a development process, I would take that and really go deeper into those movements and ideas that generate from those stimulus and improvisation sessions. But due to the fact that we don't have that immediacy, between sessions, it made it really tricky. We really need to, for further development, to be in the same room for that. So although the online was a great start, it really worked in terms of generating a lot of base ideas. In order to delve deeper, to have all of those dancers in the room would be much better. So for stage 2, I guess.
So my name is Gabriella Green-Olaire, and my family are refugees from Chile that escaped the Pinochet dictatorship in 1973. My dance practice is quite a social practice. It sort of looks at transitional space, like the transitional way of connecting or belonging to communities and people and places. And ultimately it's kind of feeding this sense of myself to sort of belong wherever I am. And I'm currently living in Gadigal country at the moment, and I was born in Darrell country, also known as Campbelltown, in New South Wales.
And hi, my name is Naoka Bundaheath. I am Waka Waka and Ngugi on my mother's side from Eastern Queensland, and I'm Biripi from New South Wales, Eastern New South Wales on my father's side. And I am living and working on Wurundjeri country in Kulin, Melbourne, Nam. And I am an independent dancer and choreographer whose practice is giving voice to the voiceless and is exploring story and storytelling through movement.
Yeah, so the project's called Historia, Memoria and Connection. I think the story behind it is Naoka and I, we went to uni together and we kind of found a really special bond. We just had very similar experiences in our kind of first years of becoming artists. And I guess for me, this project was a way of sort of, in this kind of dance, dance world that we live in, I found I didn't have many mentors that sort of were working in this kind of culturally specific way, or working with story, as Naoka said, or with emotion, or even with kind of trauma. And so I kind of felt a bit lost in terms of like how do I sort of explore this sort of stuff in my work in like a kind of contemporary way. And for me, it was a way of kind of working with her as a way of understanding how I can sort of incorporate these sort of elements into my practice.
In my practice, both of my parents have written their PhDs using our family's histories, and through that they have given me permission to turn our family's history into contemporary dance works. And so I'm a big fan of exploring that, and I was really interested in working with Gabriella and hearing her family histories, and kind of comparing and contrasting our own experiences and what that actually means for us today, 2-3 generations removed.
So we sort of we explored sort of, I guess, kind of two different things, like this similarity and differences. So we worked a lot with ideas of like holding the space for each other. And one way we did that is we worked with different memories that we both had that were obviously really authentic and individual to ourselves. And we looked at ways that we could support each other within those memories of movements. So somehow that our memories could almost sit sort of next to each other as movements, but in ways where one would be activated and the other one would be almost supporting it. We worked a lot with text as well, which is something Naoka uses a lot in her work. And we also did a bit of work with, Emma Saunders mentored us for the project, and she kind of put us in contact with a performance artist, Guillermo Gomez Pena. And we kind of did a lot of, one of his exercises is kind of manipulating the body and putting stuff on the body and adding objects. And I don't know, we actually really enjoyed it. And I think I was reflecting on it a bit later, and I thought it was kind of a nice way of sort of allowing someone else to have sort of agency over your identity in a moment. And by being, I guess, open to being sort of moved or put into positions or into images or into stories by someone else, it sort of allowed me to understand a part of myself that was maybe hidden, or like, you know, this sort of, I guess, one of our memories that are sort of, like invested in our bodies or kept within our bodies. So that was like a really nice, a really nice aspect of it as well. Like as an artist of colour, like, you know, it's always felt really, like almost isolating to become an artist, because, like I was saying before about this kind of lack of mentorship, or this kind of, my work feels really different or than what the work I'm seeing. But what I was thinking about, like after doing this residency and after chatting so much with these artists, is that the actual like First Nations artists are really our cultural leaders of this, you know, of these many nations. And I think it's like, you know, as soon as I stop looking at like, I know, a white-centred industry, and I look at First Nations artists as the centre or as the leaders, then my work suddenly feels like more relevant, and I can see how it sort of can feed into that. So I just think that's really amazing that this experience was able to demonstrate that for me.
Well, definitely as a Melbourne-based artist, Campbelltown is gorgeous. Like the art centre is absolutely beautiful to create in. Highly recommend. And I guess as an emerging choreographer, I really find it useful to bounce off ideas with mentors being in the room. And that aspect of the program I think really helped me, and especially when it came to collaboration, you know, with another artist such as Gabriella, who we have such a deep history and connection as friends and as dancers together. But, you know, it was definitely nice to have a mediator and mentor and another person to bounce off ideas with.
Yeah, I think the same. Like, I think it was so great to be able to connect with such a significant arts centre, like Campbelltown Arts Centre. It felt amazing being there, and just having like the gallery on, the exhibition, all these, they had like a library, we got some books and stuff. So it was great just to have that sort of feeding in. And I guess, like just having that funding as well was helpful, because it allowed me to, you know, to get Naoka to pay to come up here, and it, you know, all those kind of bits and pieces that you need when you do a residency that's not just on your own. You know, if you just get space, sometimes it has to be that way. So, yeah.
My name is Ellie Evangelista, and I'm based around the corner from here, actually, on Gadigal land in Darlinghurst, and my artistic practice is in dance. I did my DAIR residency at the Royal Academy of Dance in Darlinghurst, which was really important to me to kind of keep it local-based and in my neighbourhood. I needed a space that was just for me, a solo space that was big enough, and I wanted to be contributing to the local artistic community that lives in Darlinghurst. I think that's really important, and it's had a really vibrant history, and I wanted to keep it really local. So my project was called 3030, and it was a celebration of my 30th birthday, and it was made of 31-minute solos and one 30-minute solo, and each of those solos was based on a real birthday wish that I had received from people. So making the work, I treated each one of those solos really like approaching a different solo. So they all kind of had different ways of going in, whether it was getting someone else in or thinking about the floor pattern, thinking about an intention, setting an improvised score. So it was really kind of diverse and different. I truly approached every one of those solos as if it was its own solo. So that was pretty big. It was a really interesting moment being both kind of producer and performer of that work, because my producer brain was going, this is a bad idea, you should not. But my performer brain was like, oh, this work deals with time, and postponement or delay is kind of the antithesis to what this work is. It was very responsive to time. There were 31-minute solos and one 30-minute solo. So that kind of sat at the heart of the work. But I'm glad that I did, and if it happens again, it will definitely be part of whatever happens, that I can't not acknowledge that we were all, had this time in history together. I appreciated being at the RAD immensely. That was such a big part of the joy of the project. It was so much ease, and they looked after me so well at the RAD, and it's the perfect space, and I'd love to go back there. From doing my DAIR, I learnt that I love being in a studio by myself, which might be other people's kind of worst nightmare, but for me it was everything that I definitely wanted it to be. And I think it really forces you to make decisions really on your own and give you a lot of reflection on your process. It's a nice kind of check-in. Yeah, it was a nice check-in to go, okay, this is where I'm at right now, this is how I do things, this is the information I've collected from working with other people, and this is how I make things. One of the key benefits of doing DAIR was definitely that it was a funded residency. That made a huge difference in that I just didn't have to think about anything else that week. I was able to fully concentrate on the process and what it needed, and particularly because I was working toward an outcome, that made a really big difference. I also really appreciated about the DAIR that I could get into the space that I wanted. Yeah, I was creating the work in my neighbourhood and then set to perform the work where I live and where I've always lived. So that was incredibly close to my heart to kind of have that space.
I'm Anna Louise Paul, and I am a contemporary flamenco artist, and I'm based in Sydney, and I work in Western Sydney. So this year I did the DAIR in February, and the focus behind that was I was building a couple of scores that were going to be used for a commission that I had in Penang, my first international commission. I was going to be working with 6 dance artists from Chinese, Bharatanatyam, Malay and contemporary dance. And so finding a score that could be universal for them all but still bring out the really beautiful uniqueness of each of their forms. And so those scores were developed. I basically developed 2 scores obviously on my own body. And then of course COVID hit, and so that didn't happen, or it will happen. And so then for this particular showcase, what I've done is I've used those scores. I've also brought in some other material, some footwork material that I've developed fairly recently, and kind of created a journey through it where I'm working in a sense of discovery of what are these triggers and essences within the body that create an identity, if you like. Underneath that sits a rhythm, a flamenco rhythm, a ciguerillas, which is a 12-beat rhythm with 5 accents. And so that's a fairly deep, what we call cante hondo. It's a deep rhythm, which connects to my ancestry as well. And then most recently, I invited Trevor Brown, who's a bass clarinet player, to improvise with me. And he's played the score along with me, and he's had to learn the rhythm, which is really good. And he has a really interesting practice, and what he described to me was interesting, was that the bass clarinet was one of the first instruments used in maybe a century ago when Western composers were exploring Spanish material. So it was kind of Orientalism in the Deco era, if you like. There was a lot of, influence of Spanish influence in classical Western practice. And so the bass clarinet was one of those, like Stravinsky used it. And so it's got this connection to Spanish flavour anyway. So these are all the elements to the piece today. And so it was a really brilliant opportunity to have DAIR. And it's brilliant because what it did is it gave me this very short time, a week, which was long enough for me to develop 2 basically skeleton scores that I can now obviously use on myself. I can give those to other artists, and they can produce something that has a specific kind of journey, but it's their own. And the DAIR residency was critical for that, and I wouldn't have been able to get to this point. And had the Penang job happened, I wouldn't have been able to really achieve that without the DAIR residency. So it's super important to have residencies like this that artists can either explore or build material or, do what they need to do. So, yeah, it was fantastic. So it's not about personal ancestry, it's about the ancestry of the dance and where that sits within the body. So it's a methodology or a process I've been developing for about 5 years called dance DNA, and it's where things sit in the body and kind of generate a feeling. And so the triggers, so for instance, that's a trigger and that's a trigger. And so in a Chinese artist, they might have something different. They might have a different place in the body. So the score might be trigger, trigger, display, right? It might be something like that, but their triggers might be something else and their display might be something else, but there's a uniformity or consistency that will happen across all the dances in the way that they're expressing their cultural form in their body. I don't know if that makes sense.
I'm Margot Politis. I'm a dance theatre artist based in Sydney, and my practice really encompasses dance and movement, but also theatre, and set design is also a large component of what I do and what I make. So my project is called Temperance, which refers to both, being able to placate or balance one's own emotions, but it also refers to abstinence from alcohol. So the project is really about recovery, mental health, addiction, those kinds of things, but also in relation to women in Greek mythology. So looking at different temperaments, mine I suppose, and seeing how they are reflected in the stories of women in Greek mythology and how those stories are told, and kind of connecting them to my own experience in feeling all of those different emotions and responding to the world in the ways that I do through those characters. This program's so important for artists to be able to have the time to focus on their ideas and the work that they're making. For me, I actually work as an artistic director of a theatre company, so for me to have this time carved out for myself was so wonderful. It's really important because I work in a leadership role. It's important that my ideas don't decide what I'm doing in that space. So to have this space to play also as a performer, because for most of my work I'm a director, and it was absolutely amazing to get back onto the floor and to face myself as a performer. And so for me, that also offered me deeper, newer insight into what I ask my performers to do. It's just a really beneficial program.
My name is Emily Flenery, and I'm a proud Wiradjuri woman from Forbes in the Central West. I currently live on Darkinjung country on the Central Coast, and that's where mostly I dance. My project is titled Balnaruwana, which in Wiradjuri language means taking flight. My project is about the birds that are specific to Wiradjuri Dreamtime stories, most specifically the kookaburra, the magpie, the platypus, the cockatoo, and the willy wagtail, and how those stories and the personalities of the birds influence the creation of the land as we know it today. So my DAIR residency was meant to be at NAISDA, and because of COVID I had it at home, which actually ended up being such a blessing because my work is about my mob, and I actually got to research and spend a lot of time on country, and I think that really influenced the way that I ended up creating the work because I was living where the stories were born. I would really recommend this program because I think for me it really allowed me the time and the space to do the research properly for this project. I was supported with space and also financially so that my collaborator and I could really focus on the project, and we could really spend time on the things that were necessary and I think really integral to forming the work.